This is our summer series where we're recording in person at this beautiful backdrop, and these episodes are shorter. Today, we're going to be talking about battling the self doubt we feel as writers by reading within our genre. So, this was something that came up not too long ago, just a discussion that Stephanie and I had about how, as writers, we really can be hard on ourselves sometimes. And while we do share our writing with each other, you get very positive feedback. And sometimes that's really helpful in like getting rid of that imposter syndrome or just that feeling that like, oh, what I'm writing is garbage today. This is no good. Am I making any progress? The other thing that has really worked to help that is reading other books within our genre. And what I mean when I say this is not necessarily like the bestseller list books in your genre. I'm talking about the other books that writers like yourself are self-publishing or the small indie presses, that kind of level, but in your genre, because there have been numerous times as we were reflecting back that we each have encountered books in our genre and realized, oh, I can write this well, if not better. Like I've got a heartfelt story and I'm even more raw in it, or I'm even more this, or my characters are more developed than this, or I have better dialogue. And so it's like we play the comparison game already, but we're playing it with the wrong people. We're playing it with the like traditionally published, multi-million selling copy, Abby Jimenez or Cheryl Strayed or Glennon Doyle or whatever, depending on the genre, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, if we're going to play the comparison game anyways, let's actually do an accurate comparison. Because when we do, we find that we are actually much more up to snuff than we give ourselves credit for most of the time.
Yeah, it is really helpful to be a beta reader. And if you've been following our series, we had a earlier episode where we talked about that a little bit. Be a beta reader in your genre for people who are publishing independently or through an independent publisher, the smaller presses that you find out there, and not think like, oh my goodness, I have to reach this metric that's so far beyond where I am. And of course, with those authors, they go through just as many trials and errors as we have, just as much self-doubt as some of them, I've seen them in person, and that's also, important to remember that at the end of the day, we're all human. We all have these human experiences. And yes, they're light years ahead of where we are. But when you start to read across your genre and find people whose books are at the level where you're entering the system, you begin to realize like, oh yeah, I can do that. And I think about that too, because I've, joined a critique group, and there's many published authors in that critique group. And when we're sharing our, just 3,000 words of what we've written, I'm like, oh yeah, like I can do this when I see what other people are doing. And that's one of the reasons why we talk so often about the writing community, because you start to realize when you're in a writing group or when you're in those spaces, you're like, I'm really not that far off from where I want to be.
Or you can even just see your development over the course of your writing period, right? Like as I reflect back to the writing I did when I first joined our library writers group versus what I'm doing now, or as I'm editing my manuscript, I can really see it, like those chapters I wrote at the beginning of this 2.5 years of writing versus the ones I just finished up this, January through March writing sprint, so you can see it for yourself sometimes in your own work, but when you don't have that, ability to have that sort of bird's eye view perspective, then yeah, we've just kind of landed on this reading in your genre, but reading at a similar level to what the level that you'll be publishing at, can really help get rid of some of that self-doubt and that lack of confidence of whether your book is, on the right track or whether you need another round of editing or another set of eyes on it, whatever that may be. I think beta reading is a great example of ways to expose yourself. Finding out to be an ARC reader is another thing. I know you did some of that, Stephanie. You were or you did either a beta read or an ARC read for something.
Yeah, I was part of a group for romance writers specifically, and within that group, it was part of a Facebook group, and it has since shifted into another focus. But at the time, which was probably a year and a half ago or more, there were definitely new authors saying like, "Hey, does somebody want to read my work?" And so I was like, "Oh, sure, I'd love to read it," and it was very educational because it was good, but there were definitely, areas that needed improvement. But what it made me realize is that I am right in pace with where they are, and it gives me more, encouragement going forward because we all encounter the self-doubt and the feeling like, "Oh, I'm not gonna measure up." But going along with that, one of the things that I also think is important and what I've started doing more is really studying what like, if you w I mean, I know we all wanna read the bestsellers, and I think that's amazing, but what I would say with that is really study what they are doing,
Yeah.
and especially in the romance genre has a very specific pacing, and there is, you know, a expectation from readers of hitting certain beats and such, and so that's one of the things I would recommend too, because I think that also helps strengthen your own skill, and in turn, that allows for the self-doubt to be pushed a little bit further to the back or that inner critic. I mean, Julia Cameron in The Artist's Way, I mean, that's a great resource if you haven't done her, 13-week program that she has through that book. It's also, you just can have the book, The Artist's Way, work through it yourself. Um, and if you've ever heard her talk, she talks a lot about the inner critic and just giving that inner critic a name and telling them to be quiet and to just take a back seat to what you're doing because you already have everything you need to be the writer you want to be. And that's why we're here, talking about our own self doubt to give you that encouragement. Like, we're right there in it with you.
Yeah, to piggyback off of what you just said, Stephanie, the fact that you can identify what is good or needs improvement in someone else's writing should boost your own confidence that you can recognize that as you go through your own manuscript and do your edits. So it's like, if you can see where someone else is falling short, that's actually a positive on your part because that means that you recognize that in writing and therefore you can look out for it in your own. It's like when I was learning early on about like the passive versus active voice and how to switch that. It was quite a learning curve for me because I realized I wrote in passive voice. I mean, that was like my default, right? And so as a writer, I've slowly developed the skill where now as I'm actively like drafting, I'm already thinking of a different way to say it that is in an active voice. And now as I go back and do the edits of those earlier chapters where I didn't have that skill yet, I'm more quickly able to figure out, okay, here's how I rework this to make it active voice. But it was something I had to learn, and I used to not even be able to recognize it. I had to rely on programs like For Writing Aid or Hemingway in order to tell me where it was passive voice. And a couple of those sometimes would give recommendations for how to reword it. And that was helpful for me to learn that process. But now I have that skill. Now it's something that I can recognize easily in my own writing and someone else's writing. And it's all just a part of developing yourself as a writer. That's not limited to just the craft books. Those are excellent. But it's a little bit of like a next step where you then test your skill and your understanding of the craft by then trying to apply it to someone else's book and see, how they met those kind of reader expectations or standards of the genre, where they might have fallen short or could have had something a little bit different that might have made more sense or been better written. Um, all of that is a part of the process of developing yourself as a writer. Plus, you get that bonus of counteracting your own self-doubt, telling that, inside critic to kick it.
Yeah. So we definitely encourage you to find a writing community, find places where you can get outside of your writing space and again, reading in your genre to really help you work through some of those feelings of self-doubt because it's definitely helped us. So until next time, happy writing.